Hand-painted 3D art is a generic term for any style in which digital objects are designed to appear as if they are in a painting, rather than looking 3D. Conventionally, the process of painting objects in this style is entirely digital, since the objects themselves are digital, with plenty of programs like Blender even allowing artists to paint directly onto models by using drawing tablets. It is theoretically possible to paint them using real physical paint on canvas, there's just not usually a reason to do so given the ease and accessibility of digital methods. However, I am a stubborn traditional artist, and if I'm going to make hand-painted 3D art, I'll do it with my preferred medium, oil paint. I've recently made this nice basic 3D model of a human skull. In this video I will hand paint this model by physically painting on canvas, but first I'll need to tell you a bit about how we actually make 3D models. Most 3D models are constructed from a large collection of completely flat surfaces of different sizes and shapes, which are arranged to look like objects when put together. They only look smooth because of clever maths tricks. These flat surfaces can be any shape as long as it's 2D and has straight edges, but typically we use triangles since they're the simplest 2D shape. When we draw a 3D object, we just calculate the position of the corners of the triangle on screen, and then colour in every pixel between them with the colour of the triangle. Graphics cards are very good at doing this, so much so that we can calculate and draw millions of these triangles in a fraction of a second, in a process called rendering. However, just making these triangles a single colour does not look interesting. As it happens, graphics cards can also distort images very quickly. We could calculate the position of millions of triangles on screen and then rotate and distort millions of small images, and it would still only take a fraction of a second. What if, instead of filling in the spaces between a triangle's corners with a single colour, we cut an image into the correct shape, then rotated that image so that its corners match the triangles? Now we've drawn the same triangle with a more interesting pattern. This is the basic principle of 3D texturing, replacing each triangle of the model with a transformed triangular image. There is one question remaining though. How do we tell the render engine what image to paste over each triangle in a model? For one without many triangles, it's reasonable to imagine that we can just load a separate image for each triangle and draw them directly. However, this method quickly becomes unmanageable since most models are made from a significant number of triangles. We don't want to create thousands of different images to texture a relatively simple object. Instead of making a separate small image for each triangle, we create one big image called a texture that contains all of the images put together. We just have to tell each triangle which area of the texture to use. To do this, we create something called a UV map, which points each triangle to its area of the texture. For each triangle in the model, there is a triangle in the UV map which is placed somewhere on the texture. The render engine cuts out each triangle on the texture, then pastes it over the corresponding triangle on the model, in a process called mapping. The point is that a 3D object is textured using a single flat image, which is lucky since this is what oil paintings usually are. To make an oil painted texture, all I need to know is what bit of the canvas each triangle will take its image from. The obvious method is to just print out the UV map, paint over it, and then give the render engine a photo of the painting to map onto the object. However, there is a major flaw with this approach. While I'm painting, I'll have no idea what the model will look like with the painting mapped onto it. Imagine if I spent ages painting the texture and then I found out it looks terrible wrapped around the model and would need to be changed, especially when using oil painting, which would take a long time to dry in between checking how the model looks. Using this method, I would give up far before I made anything that looked good. If making traditionally hand-painted 3D art were to be a viable workflow for me, then I would need to be able to see my painting wrapped around the 3D model while I painted. As far as I know, nothing designed for this purpose existed when I started this project, so I had to roll up my sleeves and make it myself. As I see it, there are three main stages for an ideal traditional painting app. 1. Streaming a live video of the physical painting to the computer. 2. Wrapping the streamed painting around the model. 3. Displaying the hand-painted model. With the additional caveat that this should all be performed in real time, i.e. roughly the frame rate of the webcam video so that the changes are immediately shown on the model. Luckily, the first stage is very easy. It's a hardware problem that has been solved since 1993. Webcams are very common, cheap, and easy to use, and chances are you have one either built into your computer or you have a USB one somewhere in your house. Capturing the webcam stream in software is astonishingly easy. Seriously, if you have a webcam on your computer and you care about not being seen, you should get a physical cover and slide it right over the webcam when you're not using it. These lines of code are all a program on your computer needs to see you anytime that it likes. Easy peasy, problem solved. This project will be done in no time if everything is easy as that. The second stage is a bit more difficult. We need to correct the webcam frames before they reach the model so that we only use the canvas area for the texture and remove all the background. In an ideal world, the webcam would be pointed perfectly straight at the canvas and it would never move at all, in which case this step wouldn't be necessary since the canvas image would always line up with the map. However, real life is imperfect, so we need to correct the video, otherwise the canvas will be distorted or have space around it which prevents it from looking correct. To do this, we need to detect the corners of the painting and then distort the image so that the corners of the painting are now the corners of the image. For my solution, I just physically mark all 4 corners with a colour that won't be present in the painting itself, then measure the central position of each blob of pixels in the image, which are roughly the marked colour. I found that this very basic method is sufficient to get good corner locations, making it easy to transform the image so that the canvas is the full frame. Now we can map the painting onto the model the same as we would for a digitally painted texture. The final step can be approached in a number of different ways, with varying levels of difficulty. There are many freely available apps which contain real-time render engines, such as Blender, Unity, and Unreal Engine, but these apps aren't really designed to read and correct video at runtime. This isn't to say it's impossible to use them. However, I thought graphics programming would be interesting. So I decided to write an application with its own dedicated render engine, which corrects webcam frames and then displays them on the model in real time as a single contained system. I'll spare you the exact details of the app development, but for those of you interested, it's written in C++ using Vulkan as the graphics API. This is the Bobject Painter. In this app, I can load the model that I showed earlier. Then I can set the colour that will be used for corner detection, and I can see at the side how the canvas texture looks after being cropped. This webcam feed is also applied to the model, meaning that I can see how the painted texture looks on the model in real time using only a few button presses. Now all that's left is to actually paint the texture for the model. So there we have it. Traditional artists can make their own hand-painted 3D models without giving in to working digitally if they want to stick to their medium. Perhaps it's less practical than using the usual digital methods, but texturing traditionally opens doors to producing 3D art that would probably be much harder to produce digitally. The Bobject Painter app is open source, so I'll include a link in the description to the GitHub repo, which also has a few release builds for Windows devices if you'd like to try it out yourself. If you would like to see more short-form videos about other 3D models or paintings that I've made previously, I've been posting about this project on TikTok and Instagram for a few months. Those videos take much less time than this one did, so they'll probably be posted more regularly. I also have a website where you can read about what I'm doing in this project or just look at all my previous work. I hope that this video has inspired you to make your own 3D models with traditional methods. I'd love to see what you guys can make with this system.